And here now to discuss the tensions between Russia and Ukraine is Professor Nicholas Grossman. He teaches international relations at the University of Illinois and is also a senior editor of ARC Digital. Thank you so much for taking the time for us tonight.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So obviously, I know you don't have a crystal ball. I'll preface it with that. But based on your knowledge of Putin and his past aggressive actions on behalf of Russia, how do you see this playing out? How close are we also as the United States to military action in Ukraine?
So the problem is we don't really know what he's going to do, and that's because a bluff, a limited military incursion, and a full-on assault all look the same until something happens. If they're going to bluff and they want to try to get diplomatic concessions, they need to make it look good. If they're planning a full-on attack, they're going to hold back until they are ready to actually do it. So the problem is that the United States and various NATO countries, as well as Ukraine, have to prepare for all these possibilities at once. The best thing to say is there is a very high risk of war, but it is not a guarantee. And the United States and some other countries like the UK are trying to deter that possibility, both by arming the Ukrainians and giving them various more advanced weapons, like, say, anti-tank missiles, and threatening Russia with sanctions, while also leaving the possibility open for diplomacy, which might give Russia a way to get some of its goals without actually having to go to war.
Why is Russia so adamant about not allowing Ukraine into NATO?
Well, Ukraine is not a serious contender for NATO, that they have been vaguely considered to possibly move in that direction, but haven't gotten all that close. But the reason why for Russia is because from the end of the Cold War, the NATO was an anti-Soviet and then by extension anti-Russian alliance, and it had expanded eastward. And now it has a number of countries that are on Russia's border, such as Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, and that these countries then could potentially be a threat to Russia, or at least reduce Russia's ability to influence its near abroad. In another way, though, it's not that Russia is a victim here, that they have wanted to dominate Ukraine. Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire, part of the Soviet Union, and in general, they want more control of it and want a buffer state between them and the West.
And you talk about the Cold War. Are we in another Cold War? And why is this happening right now?
So I don't think it's really another Cold War. One reason why is during the Cold War, the US and Soviet Union were approximately equal in terms of power, whereas now the United States is a lot more powerful than Russia. To put that in perspective, Russia's GDP is comparable to Texas's on its own. And Russia's military budget is a tenth of America's. So it's not on that same level, but Russia's a powerful country. It's quite formidable. And so the United States has, in a way that somewhat calls back to the Cold War, sent some troops to Eastern Europe to reassure NATO allies. But the United States is not planning on, has not done any of moves, have not even put in troops in place to be able to defend Ukraine directly, whereas during the Cold War, the United States was prepared to defend various countries that the Soviet Union was threatening with its own military.
So we've heard from people inside Ukraine. We've had a lot of analysis on this. I'm also interested to know, though, what the general public in Russia is thinking. Is there any way to know if this encroachment has the support of the people?
Sort of. Part of the problem is in Russia, the government controls a lot of the media. And so people are getting a steady stream of propaganda about how this is all the West's fault, that this is actually the United States that is trying to be aggressive against Russia. And if a war starts, it'll be potentially because of the US. Now, the US doesn't have any troops in Ukraine. Russia has well over 100,000 at this point surrounding it. So it's pretty clear objectively who is being more aggressive here. But Russian media is playing up that Russia is a victim. And as a result, we can't really rely on public opinion polling on this. It's not like we could trust Russian state media on it. But as best I can tell, there does seem to be Russian popular support. But part of that is because they might not really know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. What are the U.S. interests in Ukraine before I let you go? Why should Americans be on the ground in neighboring countries? And if you don't foresee American troops going into Ukraine, why not?
Well, the reason why not is because the United States is not a treaty ally of Ukraine. Unlike NATO countries, the United States is not obligated to defend Ukraine, and it would be very risky to potentially even start World War III over it. The Russian interests in Ukraine are greater than America's interests, and everybody knows it. So the conflict is shaped in a different way than, say, if you think Cold War threats to a country like Germany or Italy. But U.S. interests there are defending democracy, just as a general principle, upholding the West, the European Union, and NATO, and in particular, trying to signal to Russia that aggression like this will not be met with appeasement. And the reason why is because if this works for Russia, if these threats or attacks work, then likely some of the NATO countries like Estonia are next. And if that happens, then the United States is committed to defending them. So it would be better for American interests to try to stop this here and reach a stability with Russia rather than have Russian aggression work.
All right, Professor Grossman, thank you so much. This has been very educational. We appreciate you being here tonight.
All right, thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.